2257. The footman who finished a palace break in the British Royal Guard had not yet caught. My name is Thomas Wren. I am 24 years old. I have been a footman for 91 days, and the story I'm about to tell you happened at 2:47 in the morning, in a corridor I was not supposed to be standing in, holding a silver tray I had been sent to collect. I remember the time because I had checked my watch twice in 3 minutes. The second hand on the watch my father gave me when I left home in Norfolk has a slight stutter at the top of the hour. I had been watching it stutter. The corridor was dim. The household keeps the night lights low. Soft yellow bulbs in brass sconces, one every 6 feet, throwing pools of light that do not quite reach each other. Between the pools, the carpet is the color of old wine, and the wood panels on the wall are the color of strong tea. You learn the colors of a place when you walk it in the dark. I was walking it in the dark because Mr. Halverson had sent me, the senior footman. A tall, thin man with hair the color of pencil lead and a voice that never rises. He had asked me quite calmly, an hour earlier, if I would mind retrieving a small silver salver from the green sitting room. It had been used for an evening service and forgotten there. He could have gone himself. He could have sent Daniel, the kitchen porter, who was still awake. He sent me because I was the newest, and the newest fetches things. That is how it works. I did not mind. I liked the building at night. I liked the way it sounded when the day staff had gone home and only the skeleton rotor remained. The radiators clicking, the faint hum of the refrigerators 2 floors below. The wind against the old leaded windows on the north side, where the glass is uneven and the wind seems to push harder. I was 3 doors away from the green sitting room when I heard the sound. It was a slow drag, fabric against wood. The kind of sound a long coat makes when someone is walking carefully and the hem of the coat catches the bottom of a door frame. I stopped. I want to tell you, honestly, that I knew immediately. I did not. The first thing I thought was that one of the older staff had come up for something and was moving slowly, because that is how the older staff move at night. I thought it was Margaret Coyle, the under-butler, who sometimes did her own inventory walks because she did not trust the day list. I thought it might be a guest who had wandered. I thought it might be a curtain. I did not think it was a man with a screwdriver. I stood in the corridor and I listened. The sound came again, closer this time, from the green sitting room, the very room I had been sent to. I did not move for what felt like a long time and was probably 4 seconds. And then, because I am a footman, and because footmen are trained to walk towards rooms, not away from them, I walked towards it. Nothing in 91 days had prepared me for what I was about to see. Let me take you back a few hours. I think you need to know how the building was that night, because the building is part of what happened. It had been a quiet evening. There had been a small private dinner in one of the smaller dining rooms, 12 guests finished by 10, and then the household had emptied out faster than usual because the next morning was a public engagement and the day rota would start at 4. Most of the senior staff had gone to their rooms by 11. The kitchen had been cleared by midnight. By 1 in the morning, the only people on the corridor where I worked were me, Mr. Halverson, Danielle in the lower kitchen scrubbing a copper pan that had burnt at the bottom, and Margaret somewhere on the floor above doing her walk. The reduced rota was normal for the night before a big morning. Everyone needed sleep. The thinking was that nothing happened between 1 and 4. The thinking, on most nights, was correct. There was one other thing about that night that I did not know at the time and would only learn afterwards. There had been contractors in the East Service Wing for 3 days, repairing a section of stone facing that had cracked in the autumn weather. The contractors had a scaffold against the East Service wall. They had been told to take it down each evening. They had not. They had wrapped it in tarpaulin and left it standing because they were coming back the next morning and it would save them an hour. The scaffold reached the second-floor window of a small storage room that was used for linen. The window had a latch that had been replaced 12 years ago and had not been checked since. I did not know any of that. I knew the corridors I walked, the doors I was allowed to open, the doors I was not. I knew the names of the bells in the bellboard in the staff hall. I knew the order of service for breakfast trays. I knew the small things that a junior footman is supposed to know. I knew most of all the phrase Mr. Halverson had drilled into me in my second week. He had sat me down in the small office off the staff dining hall, and he had said, in his quiet voice, that there was one thing every footman in this house had to be able to say without thinking. He said it was the phrase for unexpected encounters with members of the public on grounds. He said it was the phrase you used if you ever came across someone you did not recognize inside a corridor or a room. The phrase was this: "Good evening, sir or madam. I am a member of the household staff. Can I help you find where you are meant to be?" He had me repeat it 10 times, 20 times. He had me say it walking. He had me say it standing. He had me say it while pretending to carry a tray. He said the phrase was a key. He said you put it in the lock of a strange situation and it usually opened the door without anything else having to happen. I had laughed about it privately with Daniel once. I had said it sounded like the kind of thing you would say to a lost dog. Daniel had laughed too. He had told me he had a similar phrase he was supposed to use if anyone wandered into the kitchen, and his was even longer. I had not, in 91 days, ever needed the phrase. Not once. I was about to need it. I walked towards the green sitting room. I want to describe the corridor to you, because the corridor is the thing I see every time I close my eyes now. It is about 40 feet long. The carpet runs the length of it. On the left side, 3 tall windows, each curtained. On the right side, 4 doors. The green sitting room is the 3rd door on the right. The door was open. It should not have been open. Not at that hour. The night procedure is that doors to unused rooms are pushed to, but not latched, because latching them sounds too loud against the silence. They are left ajar by perhaps an inch. This door was ajar by perhaps a foot. I stopped outside it. I leaned forward very slowly, because I did not want my shoes to make any more noise than they already were. The shoes we wear are leather-soled and they tap on parquet. The corridor was carpet, so I was safe in the corridor. The green sitting room had parquet at the edges and a large carpet in the center. If I stepped through the doorway, I would step onto parquet. I looked through the gap. There was a man standing in the middle of the room. He had his back half turned to me. He was wearing a long dark coat, wet at the shoulders and across the lower back, as if he had been outside in the rain for some time. He had no hat. His hair was thinning and dark and stuck to the back of his neck. He was holding a paper file under his left arm, a buff-colored cardboard file, the kind a solicitor might use, tied with a piece of string. In his right hand, hanging loose at his side, he was holding a screwdriver, a long one, the kind with a yellow plastic handle, probably 8 inches in the shaft. He was looking at a painting on the far wall, a small landscape. He was looking at it the way a man in a museum looks at a painting, with his head slightly tilted. I did not breathe. I want to tell you what went through my mind in that moment because it was not heroic. The first thing that went through my mind was that I had walked into the wrong part of a dream. The second thing was that I should turn around immediately and run, very quietly, back down the corridor. The third thing, and this is the one I am ashamed of, was that I did not want to be the one who had to deal with this. I wanted it to be Mr. Halverson. I wanted it to be the protection officer at the end of the next corridor. I wanted it to be anyone who was not me. The fourth thing was the radio in my pocket. We carry a small radio on the night shift, black plastic, the size of a bar of soap. It clips to the inside of the waistcoat. It has one button on the top. You press the button and you can speak to the night control room. They can hear you. You cannot hear them. It is one way for the junior staff. The senior staff have 2-way radios. We have 1-way. I reached into my waistcoat. My hand was already shaking. I found the radio. I found the button. And I realized I did not know what to say. I had been trained in my first week on what to say. The training had been brief. You press the button, you say your name, you say your location, you say the nature of the incident. Wren Green sitting room, intruder, 3 words, and a name. That was all. But my thumb did not press the button, because in the second before I pressed it, the man in the room turned his head. He had heard me breathe. He turned his head, and he saw me through the gap in the door, and his eyes were not the eyes of a thief. They were the eyes of a man who was somewhere else. Wet, watery eyes, ringed underneath with the kind of dark that comes from not sleeping for a long time. He looked at me, and he did not look surprised. He looked almost relieved. He said one word. He said, "Oh," and I, without thinking, without deciding, with my thumb still resting on the button of the radio that I had not yet pressed, said the phrase. I said, "Good evening, sir." I am a member of the household staff. Can I help you find where you are meant to be? My voice was shaking. I heard it shake. I heard the words come out and I heard them as if someone else was saying them. The shaking did not make them sound less like the phrase. It made them sound more like a question, more like a real question. The man in the room blinked at me. He did not move the screwdriver. He did not raise it. He held it the way a man holds a pen he has forgotten he is holding. He said, "Are you the footman?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Good. I have been trying to find someone." I pressed the button on the radio. I held it down. I said very quietly into the small black plastic green sitting room, "Please send help." I did not say the word intruder. I'm not sure why. I think because the man was still looking at me, and I did not want to say a word that might change his face. I let go of the button. I stepped, very slowly, through the doorway. The parquet creaked under my shoe. I winced. The man did not move. I will tell you his name now, because I learned it later, and because using his name is, I think, the only fair thing to do. His name was Aldous Finch. He was 51 years old. He had grown up in a village in Lincolnshire. He had worked for many years as an assistant in a bookshop in a market town until the bookshop closed. He had a sister who had not heard from him in 18 months. He had, in the year before that night, become unwell in a way that no one had caught in time. I did not know any of that when I stepped into the room. I knew only that he had a screwdriver and a file of papers, and that he had answered my phrase with a question of his own, and that he had not yet hurt me. I said, "Sir, may I ask how you came to be here?" He looked at the paper file under his arm. He held it up, slightly, as if showing me proof of something. He said, "I have been writing letters." I said, "I see, sir." He said, "For 7 years, I have been writing them. No one has answered." I said, "I'm sorry to hear that, sir." He said, "I came to bring the letters." I thought if I brought them in person, someone would read them. I said, "I understand, sir. I want you to picture me standing there in my black waistcoat and white shirt and the small grey tie we wear on the night shift, with my hands held loosely in front of me the way we are trained to hold them, saying I understand, sir, to a man with a screwdriver. I want you to picture how small I felt. I felt like a boy in a costume. I felt like the building was holding its breath around me. But the phrase had worked. The key had gone into the lock. The door had not yet opened, but it had not been slammed either. I needed to keep him talking. There's a thing they did not teach me in training, but which I worked out by accident in the next 9 minutes and 40 seconds. People who have come a long way to be heard do not want to be stopped. They want to be heard. If you let them speak, they will keep speaking. If you ask them about the thing they care about, they will tell you about it. They will tell you about it slowly, because it is the thing they have been carrying for a long time, and they have not been allowed to put it down. I asked him about the letters. I said, "Sir, may I ask what the letters say?" He looked at me, his eyes filled, for a second, with something that was almost gratitude. As if no one had asked him that question in a very long time, he said, "They are about my mother." He began to tell me. He told me in a low, slow voice that his mother had died 7 years earlier in a hospital in Lincolnshire. He told me that he believed her care had not been correct. He told me that he had written to the hospital, and then to the trust, and then to the Member of Parliament, and then to a national newspaper, and then, eventually, beginning 4 years ago, to the household, to the family. He believed that if a member of the family read his letters, something would be done. He had a list of names of nurses. He had a list of dates. He had copies of the medical notes he had been able to obtain. They were in the file under his arm. He told me all of this while I stood 6 feet away from him with my hands held loosely in front of me. He told me that he had tried for 2 years to come in person. He had stood outside the gates. He had stood outside the gates in summer and in winter. He had given letters to the police officer at the gate. The police officer had taken the letters and put them in a box. Aldous did not know if the box had been read. He told me that 2 nights ago he had walked past the East Service Wing and had seen the scaffold against the wall. He told me that he had stood across the street looking at it for most of yesterday. He told me that tonight he had come back. He had climbed the scaffold. He had found a window with a latch he could push up with a screwdriver. He had not broken the window. He had not, he said, broken anything. He had wanted me to know that. He had come in through the linen room and walked along 3 corridors and stopped in the green sitting room because the light was on and the painting on the wall reminded him of a painting his mother had owned. He said, "I am not here to hurt anyone." He said it twice. He said it the second time more quietly than the first. I believed him. I believed him because his hands were shaking worse than mine, and because the screwdriver was still hanging at his side, and because he had not in 9 minutes moved 1 step closer to me. I want to tell you something about that conversation. I want to tell you that while he was talking, I was doing 2 things. I was listening to him. I was honestly listening to him, because the things he was saying were the things of a real man with a real grief. And you cannot fake the listening, or he would have known. But I was also, with my body, moving very slowly. An inch at a time, I had positioned myself when I stepped through the doorway with my left shoulder almost touching the heavy curtain that hung beside the door. Behind that curtain on the wall, there was a small panic strip, a flat metal switch. If you pressed it, it sent a silent alarm to the central control room. Every room in the household had one. I had been shown them in my first week. I had never touched one. While Aldous spoke about his mother, I leaned very slowly against the curtain. I let my shoulder press into the wall behind it. I felt the strip with my shoulder blade. I pressed. I did not know if it had worked. There was no sound. There was no light. There was only the curtain and my shoulder and the small click I felt rather than heard. Aldous kept talking. He was telling me now about a particular nurse. He was telling me in detail about a Tuesday afternoon 7 years ago. He was crying quietly, without seeming to notice that he was crying. I said, "Sir, I am listening." I said it because it was true, and because I needed him to keep speaking. I have replayed those 9 minutes and 40 seconds many times. I have replayed them in my own head, and I have replayed them in the small interview room they put me in the next morning. I have replayed them with 3 different people asking me the same questions in slightly different ways. I can tell you now almost word for word what Aldous said. I can also tell you what I was thinking in the gaps between his sentences. I was thinking about Mr. Halverson. I was thinking about whether the panic strip had worked. I was thinking about how loud my own pulse sounded in my own ears. I was thinking about my father's watch, still stuttering on my wrist, and how strange it was that a thing so small could keep working when everything else in the world felt suspended. I was thinking also about a thing my mother had said to me when I left home. She had said, "Thomas, remember that most people you meet are mostly frightened." She had said it on the platform at Norwich Station, with her hand on the side of my face. I had not understood it then. I understood it now. Aldous Finch was frightened. He had been frightened for 7 years. He was, in the green sitting room at 2:56 in the morning, frightening, but he was also frightened. Both of those things were true at the same time. I kept him talking. I asked him about his mother. Not about the hospital, about her. About what she had been like. He stopped for a moment. He looked at me. The eyes that had been wet became, for a second, almost soft. He said she was a small woman. She made bread on Sundays. I said, "That sounds lovely, sir." He said, "She taught me to read." I said, "My mother taught me to read as well, sir." It was the first thing I had said that was not a phrase or a question. It was a thing about myself. I do not know why I said it. I think I said it because I wanted him to know that there was a person in the room with him, not just a uniform, not just a footman, a person whose mother had also taught him to read. His face changed. It is hard to describe how the lines around his mouth softened. His shoulders, which had been held high and tight, came down half an inch. He looked at the screwdriver in his right hand, as if he had forgotten it was there. He said, "Thank you for listening." I said, "Of course, sir." And then from the corridor behind me, I heard the softest possible sound of 2 pairs of soft-soled shoes on carpet, not running, walking, the way the protection officers are trained to walk when they do not want to startle. I did not turn my head. I kept my eyes on Aldous. I said, "Sir, there are some people behind me who would like to speak with you. They are going to come into the room. I would like you to put the screwdriver down on that small table, slowly, so that no one is frightened." I said it the way I had heard Mr. Halverson say things, quietly, without rising, without falling. Aldous looked at me. He looked at the screwdriver. He looked at the small inlaid table beside him. He bent slowly at the knees, and he placed the screwdriver on the table. The plastic handle made a small soft sound against the wood. He stood up again. He held the paper file with both hands now in front of him, like a shield, or like an offering. The two officers came into the room. I will not describe them. They do not want me to. I will say only that they were calm, and that they had been trained for this, and that they took Aldous Finch by the arms, gently, one on each side, and they walked him out of the green sitting room without raising their voices. He went with them. He did not resist. He looked back at me once as he went through the door. He nodded. A small nod, I nodded back. The file went with him. I learned later that every page of it was read. I learned later that it was found to contain nothing that had not been in the previous letters, but that the previous letters on review were also found to have contained a great deal that no one had ever properly answered. I learned later that he was taken first to a police station and then to a hospital, and that he was, finally, after 7 years, given the kind of care he had been needing all along. I am told he is doing better. I am told his sister has found him. I hope that is true. When the room was empty, I sat down on the floor. I did not mean to. My knees simply stopped working. I sat down with my back against the cold cast iron radiator under the third window, and I put my hands flat on the parquet beside me, and I shook. I shook for a full minute. It was the kind of shaking that starts in the chest and goes out to the hands, the kind that you cannot stop by deciding to stop. I sat on the parquet floor of the green sitting room, and I let it pass through me. Mr. Halverson found me. He came in quietly, the way he came in everywhere. He looked at me on the floor, he looked at the curtain, he looked at the small table where the screwdriver had been. He nodded once to himself. He said, "Mr. Wren." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Would you like a cup of tea?" I said, "Yes, sir, I would like that very much." He went and he fetched Margaret Coyle. Margaret came in with a mug of tea on a small wooden tray. She did not say anything. She sat down on the floor next to me in her dark grey dress, and she held the mug while I held it too, because my hands were still shaking and I would have spilled it. She held the mug with me until the shaking stopped. Then she let me drink it. She said, "That was well done, Thomas." It was the first time she had used my first name. I drank the tea. The investigation began before the sun came up. The scaffold was taken down by 6 in the morning. The contractors were spoken to in a way that I am told they will remember. The latch on the linen room window was replaced before lunch. The CCTV system was reviewed. It was discovered that the cameras had picked up Aldous Finch climbing the scaffold at 2:31 in the morning. The operator on duty had flagged it. The radio call had been routed by a configuration error that had been in the system for some weeks to the wrong sector. By the time the correct sector was alerted, I had already pressed the panic strip with my shoulder blade behind the curtain. The official chain of response had not failed exactly. It had been 12 minutes behind. 12 minutes is a long time in a corridor at night. The household asked me not to speak of it. I did not. I have not until now. And I'm telling you only because enough time has passed and enough has been written about that night in other ways that my telling can no longer cause any harm. The names I have used for the staff are not their real names. Aldous Finch is his real name, because his name has been in the public record for some time now, and because I think he should be remembered as a person and not as an incident. 3 weeks after that night, an envelope appeared in my pigeonhole in the staff hall. It was a thick cream envelope. My name was written on the front in a hand I did not recognize. I opened it in the small staff garden behind the kitchens, sitting on a wooden bench under a bare lime tree, with my coat buttoned against the November cold. Inside the envelope was a single card. The card said, "Thank you, Mr. Wren, for the steadiness of your voice." There was no signature. There did not need to be one. I put the card in the inside pocket of my coat. I sat on the bench for a long time. I watched a pigeon walk along the top of the garden wall. I thought about my mother, and about Aldous Finch's mother who made bread on Sundays, and about how strange it was that 2 women, neither of whom I had ever met, had been somehow in the green sitting room with me that night, holding my hands steady when I could not hold them steady myself. I have thought a lot since about what happened. I have thought about the phrase Mr. Halverson drilled into me. "Good evening, sir or madam. I am a member of the household staff. Can I help you find where you are meant to be?" It is a phrase that sounds, when you are first taught it, like the kind of thing you say to a lost dog. It is, in fact, the most generous question one person can ask another person. It is the question that assumes the other person belongs somewhere. It is the question that offers help instead of accusation. It is, in its way, the entire job of a footman, distilled into one sentence. I have thought about the protection officers who came in soft shoes and did not raise their voices, and who took Aldous out of the room with their hands gentle on his arms. They are trained for the loud part of the work. They are also trained, I learned that night, for the quiet part. I have thought about Margaret Coyle, who sat on the floor of the green sitting room with me and held a mug of tea with my hands. I have thought mostly about how strange it is that the smallest people in a great building can sometimes be the ones who hold the line. The footman in the corridor, the kitchen porter scrubbing a copper pan 2 floors below, the under-butler on her walk. We are not the ones you see at the windows. We are not the ones in the photographs. We are, on a quiet Tuesday night in late November, the only ones awake at 2:47 in the morning, holding silver trays we were sent to fetch, walking towards sounds that should not be there. I have one more thing to tell you, and then I'm done. A month after the night in the green sitting room, I was walking the same corridor at the same hour. I do not know why I was walking it. I had not been sent. I had finished my shift. I was walking it the way you walk past a place where something happened to you, because the place pulls you back and you let it. I stopped outside the green sitting room. The door was pushed to, the proper inch ajar. The corridor lights were the same dim yellow. The carpet was the same color of old wine. The wood was the same color of strong tea. I stood there. I listened. There was no sound that did not belong. I put my hand for one moment on the doorframe. The wood was cool under my palm. I said, very quietly to no one, the phrase one more time. "Good evening, sir. I'm a member of the household staff. Can I help you find where you are meant to be?" The corridor did not answer. It did not need to. I walked back down the corridor towards the staff stairs in the soft tap of my leather-soled shoes on parquet. My father's watch stuttered once at the top of the hour. I did not check it. I knew what time it was. It was the time when the smallest people in the building hold the line. And the line, on that night, had held.